Hello students, my name is Gaurav Bansal and today we are going to discuss the topic of Export Preparedness Index 2021. So this is the second report in the series. NITI aayog released the first report last year, that was 2020 report, and since then we have not changed the methodology remains the same, and almost if we see the ranks also do not change very much. So in the tradition to continue certain reports towards providing more data to the public and towards promoting a federal competitive spirit or competitive federalism as it is more popularly called, the NITI aayog and in a way Indian government is now providing state rankings on different parameters so that states can continue to compete against each other in a healthy way. They can find inspiration from each other, they can find certain guidelines from each other, they can look at each other in order to identify their targets. So for example, NITI aayog has already published reports on the infrastructure readiness, the reports on health index, and then it has also produced many other state rankings, and likewise this state ranking is also there. So for example, if health is topped by Kerala, then this is topped by Gujarat. So while implementing the health policies and health parameters, one should be looking towards Kerala. When it comes to the export policies, when it comes to the export support infrastructure, one may be looking towards the Gujarat. So that is what we are trying to do here. Let us promote the good things about various states. Let us identify where each of the state has scored, where each state is improving. So this in a way will encourage states. For example, Madhya Pradesh would be encouraged to compete against, let us say, Haryana. They are in the same category of landlocked states. It would be difficult for Madhya Pradesh to, let us say, compete with Maharashtra, because Maharashtra is a coastal state, and when it comes to export, coastal states definitely have an edge. And likewise, NITI aayog has also divided states into different categories. So let us see into this report in details. So the basic information first. The report is published by NITI aayog in partnership with the Institute of the Competitiveness. And aim and objective has already been discussed by me. The important aim is to prepare certain database on the basis of which Government of India and different state governments get certain guidelines. They get certain framework, they get certain, let us say, objectives, certain benchmarks. So this creates benchmarks. It creates certain competitive spirit. That's what we need. So for example, a state wants to create a trade policy. So in order to create a trade policy, first of all, it should have a certain benchmark. It should have certain policy targets in the mind, that I want to become this, I want to do that, or I want to achieve this particular aim. So those aims, those targets, those policy designs, where will they come from? They will come from such databases that, okay, I want to achieve what Gujarat has done there. I want to achieve what, let us say, Karnataka has done there. When it comes to health, somebody may say that I want to achieve what Pondicherry has done there. So for example, if Chandigarh wants to decide its policies, then for Chandigarh maybe Pondicherry is a good role model. Then let us say Tamil Nadu or Kerala, because a city-state definitely would be able to follow the structure of a city-state in a better way. And likewise, we have different other states in different categories. So states can emulate each other. If they can find some states with good performance, they can look towards those states with certain, let us say, aspiration that tomorrow I want to become like them, or in the long run I want to get past them. So this competitive spirit is necessary. So for example, in classes also, even in smaller classes, we do provide certain ranks, and we do provide certain grades. These grades are there for students to compete against each other, and we want them to compete in a healthy way. And likewise, we want our states also to compete in a healthy way. So it's not just about the competition. On what basis you will do competition, that also depends upon certain benchmarks. So this report not only gives rank, but also gives number of data, number of different areas on the basis of which it ranks states. Okay, it's not a overall rank, just it gives us rank on 11 different parameters. It gives us rank on at least 70 different sub parameters. So that we will see in a while. So as we can see, the states are divided in 4 categories: coastal states, landlocked states, the Himalayan states, and the UT or the city states. And this categorization is necessary because you cannot really see Karnataka getting inspiration from Goa in a good way or in a very healthy way, because Goa is a very small city state and the conditions in Goa would be very different from conditions in Karnataka. Even though geography is same, they are neighbors, but still, just because of the sheer size and the complexities that comes with that, their policies would be very different from each other. Okay. So I've already discussed all these points, the aims and objectives of the reports. And if you want to read them in further details, this slide would be available to you for download. So I will provide a download link in the description or in the comment once this is uploaded. So please download the slides and read it in further detail. So as I told you, there are many parameters and sub-parameters. The report calls them pillar. So it doesn't matter by what name you define something. Ultimately, we are talking about the parameters or the measurable variables on the basis of which we are going to evaluate the states. So how are we going to evaluate the states? The evaluation would be done on the basis of trade policy, that how each state is designing its policy. So it has 2 different parameters under it. The first is export promotion policy, then institutional framework. Together these have 20% weightage, or each has 10% weightage. In fact, out of the 11 parameters, 9 have 10% weightage and only 2 have 5% weightage each. And in this area I have just underlined the 2. The trade support and R&D infrastructure, these have 5% weightage, else every single parameter has 10% weightage. So in total 11 parameters, and total weight of course must always be 100. So trade policy has 20% weightage, and this is a possible question in PT examination also. They can ask you to arrange them in the order, or they can ask you which of the following parameters has the highest weightage. They can ask you business ecosystem, they can ask you export ecosystem in the options, and you have to choose business ecosystem in that case. If they are asking you within the sub parameters or the sub pillars, then it would be the trade support and R&D infrastructure which have less weightage compared to others. So these are some things that you can remember for PT examination. So business ecosystem. So from policy, we need to understand what kind of policies different states can create. Whether you have a certain SEZ policy, whether you have a certain subsidy policy, a certain tax support policy, you give certain concession, you provide certain extra support to the export oriented units. So that comes under the trade support, trade policy support. And institutional framework, do you have institutions at your district level, or if not at district level, at least at state level, which are identifying the export oriented units, they are providing them with training, they are giving them certain support. So that is also necessary. So states which have created such institutions at state level, and if possibly at district level also, they are definitely going to rank better compared to the other states. So you should create some institutional framework. So certain trade promotion councils, certain export promotion councils or bodies, so they will identify certain areas and give support to those firms, provide training to people in those firms. That is ultimately what we need. And export promotion is ultimately largely done through providing them tax incentives, or SEZ is also basically about the tax incentives. So you provide them better incentives, you give them certain advantages. So that all comes under the trade policy. Just a minute, sorry. Yes, all of that comes under the trade policy. Then business ecosystem. So business ecosystem, what do we really understand by the business ecosystem? The report says there are 4 parameters. Business environment, how is the business environment in the states? So what do we understand by the business environment? That how good is the contract enforcement, for example? How easy is it to take finance? How easy is it to register a firm? What is the ease of doing business in that state? All of that comes under your business environment. How good is your infrastructure? Transport connectivity. States which have excellent transport infrastructure, good connectivity, definitely will perform better in every area. It's not just export. Those states are likely to excel in industrial activity in almost all other areas. And then access to finance, financial infrastructure is also very important. You need to provide financial support to the firms. So business environment, how easy it is to register a firm, what is the ease of doing business. Then infrastructure, how good is your infrastructure, whether you have good quality airports, whether you have good quality logistical stations, whether you have, now government is coming up with this rapid rail transportation system. Do you have rapid rail transportation system? Do you have fast speed transport corridors? How many freeways you have? Freeways, or in India we call them national highways or the expressways. Okay, so different countries use different terms. In USA they're called freeways. In many of the countries in the world, in fact, these are called freeways. In India we call them expressways. Basically red light free long corridors. So all of this comes under the business ecosystem. How much support are you giving to the business activity in general? Not just export, in general to entire business activity, because this will support all kind of trade, all kind of businesses. And then apart from general support, then we come to exclusive support. How much support you exclusively give to the export oriented units, the export ecosystem. This is our third pillar and it contains 3 of the parameters. The first is export infrastructure. How much infrastructure you have created specifically for export oriented units. Do you have training centers? Do you have incubation centers? Do you have support for startups? Do you have institutional framework for them? How much R&D support you are providing? Okay, how much of R&D infrastructure is there, especially? So trade support, how much trade support do you provide? How easy it is to get letter of credits? How much support in general in every aspect of trade you are providing? Mostly such support is provided in the form of trainings, the regular workshops through which exporters get to know about opportunities. They get to travel and meet the buyers abroad, customers abroad. States can facilitate them and several states are doing very well on that parameter. Why Gujarat in particular is number 1 here? Because Gujarat has done very well when it comes to the trade support. Madhya Pradesh is doing very well of late in the trade support area. Haryana is doing well in the trade support area. Definitely other states must also be doing well. About these states I've read the independent exclusive policies, so I know from personal experience and personal experience of my friends' families. So that is why I know about the trade support here. But in general, all these states which are doing well in the rankings are also providing excellent trade support. So for example, from Gujarat state, they do create lot of groups and they enable the meetings between them and the foreign buyers. So they invite foreign buyers, they even pay their expenses or subsidize them to a large extent and invite them to Gujarat and allow a meetup between the local exporters, local manufacturer, and that is how the state has encouraged a lot of export from it. So that is what I'm talking about when it comes to the trade support. Then export performance. So far we were talking about the policy aspects, how much support are you providing. Now this parameter is about your performance. So this is the only parameter which looks into the actual performance of the state. How much you have performed in the area of exports. Rest of the three were about what you are doing in order to support export, support business activity. But this last parameter is about the performance. So even this can also come as equation that out of these four parameters, this is the only one which talks about the actual measurements or the actual datas, measurable datas. So it looks into the two parameters, export diversification and growth orientation. How much diversified are your export? Of course, that is very important because it's not just about the volume, it's about many other things. How much destinations are there? Then it is also about, let us say, the basket. How many products do you export? So for example, when it comes to the export diversification, Haryana is doing very well there. Haryana is a small landlocked state, but it is exporting to almost 91 or 92 countries in the world. It is performing really well on that parameter. It is not dependent only on export to one country or two countries or few areas or one particular geography. So for example, certain states in India are dominated by particular region. For example, let us say some states are dominated by the Middle East or what we call West Asia. So bulk of their export are limited to West Asia. If West Asia has disturbance, their exports will suffer immediately. But if you have great deal of diversification, if you are exporting to different regions in the world, then you will not easily be affected by disturbances in one region or two regions. Similarly, growth orientation, how much growth have you achieved? Okay. What is your actual performance in the exports? So diversification and growth, these are the two things that we measure, and on that basis also we rank the states. So weightage of that is 20%, and that is how the report is ranking the states. So let us look at it into further detail. I will keep it brief, but let me give you a bit more detail here. So for example, the export promotion policy, the first parameter, that itself talks about large number of sub measures. It itself depends upon large number of under parameters or sub parameters. Now you do not have to remember all of them, so you do not have to worry, but all of this will give you good idea when you have to talk about the policy measures, when you have to talk about the reforms required in order to improve the performance. So when you do performance evaluation, for example, a question comes on Indian exports that what strategy India should take in order to encourage export further, or can India realize its dream of $1 trillion of exports? So how you are going to talk about that? You have to talk about with the help of these points, that for example in reforms you can talk about that appointment of a commissioner at each district, that export commissioner we can appoint. The job of this export commissioner is to promote the exports from the district, identify what are the strengths of that district. Then we can also adopt something like one district, one product, that we create a cluster in each district, we identify a product, or maybe on a group of districts. I'm not saying it can be each district as specially, but such suggestions you can provide if you know about further details. So please download the slides and read about these. I'm definitely sure that you cannot read them in the video here, but for that purpose we have the slides. Okay. From PT perspective, these are not important because they are not likely to go into that much detail, because number of such sub parameters is around 70. You remember the 11, that is more than enough. You remember that 2 of them have less percentage and rest of them are equally represented by 10%. That is more than enough. You remember the pillars, that is necessary. So further detail is not required for you to cramp up, but this support or this extra points will help you to write answer in mains. So from that perspective I included them in the presentation here. So there are a lot of points here. For example, international access. How easy is the international access from your state? Do your state have a port? So that option is only available for the coastal state. For the other states, do your state have international airport, or do you have international airport in vicinity? All such questions become important then. And grievance redressal. If somebody feels that there is a problem in getting the benefits that the state government announced, there is a mechanism for grievance redressal. State government announces support but later doesn't give it to people. That can be a big problem. So have you created certain structure where people, those who were promised certain benefits by the state and have not received those benefits, they can come and complain. So all of this becomes important in that context. So business environment, this is what I was talking about. Ease of doing business is the most important parameter here. And then investor summit, cost of doing business, labor reforms, innovative capacity, these are the sub parameters under this. Then power availability. In the infrastructure, what is important? How much is the power availability, internet facility, how much is the cluster formation, number of the industrial corridor, then how much is the industrial area as a percentage of the total area, number of clusters, then does that state has created any kind of IT park, technology park, logistics park, software park. So these kind of initiatives are also very important to promote business activity. And likewise, all of these parameters have a lot of further details for those who really want to know in greater detail. So please download the report and go through the extra sub-points. You do not have to remember them, you do not have to mug them up, but you can remember some 5-6 good points, and those would be very useful when you talk about the reforms, when you talk about the important points or important policies that leads to growth. So there you can use them. Now, once we have discussed the overview and the methodology, let us come to the rankings. So, first of all, we have seen that coastal states definitely will perform better. So, this is in no surprise, coastal states definitely have to perform better when it comes to the exports. So, Gujarat is consecutively the #1 state when it comes to the export preparedness, and it is followed by Maharashtra, Karnataka and then Tamil Nadu. And you know, only these rankings will not be sufficing. If you see the score, that is also be very important. We will see the scores, but before that we just look at the rankings. So Gujarat followed by Maharashtra, Karnataka and then Tamil Nadu in the coastal states. But what is interesting here is that while Gujarat, Maharashtra are doing very well, the next Karnataka is a very distant third. The gap between the first two and the next two is very high. Then in the landlocked states, it is Haryana, which has been the best performing state. And I've already told you that these states are there because they are doing certain efforts, they are taking certain pain in order to promote exports from their area. Individual examples can also be picked out. Then the other categories are Himalayan states and the union territories or the city states. So in the Himalayan states, it is Uttarakhand which is doing relatively better among all the states. But the performance of Himalayan states is not really that good. Okay, and then union territory performance is also very poor because union territories must be performing somewhere above the landlocked states, but we will see they are nowhere close. And how does this affect those states? This is also something that report talks about in greater detail. So for example, you can read the state with higher exports also experience a high state GDP. So this is natural that states which are doing well on exports obviously are likely to have better per capita GDP and overall the state GDP. So the top states here, Gujarat and Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, etc., they all have very high state GDP. Okay, for smaller states, we can look at the per capita income. When it comes to the per capita income, Haryana is doing very well. Because of its small size, it won't come into the competition of the overall GDP, but in per capita GDP, it is much higher. And then we can find that 16 out of the 36 states in the UT have scored above the national average. That means the national average that we get, in that 16 states are above that national average and 20 states are below the national average. And the gap between them is also very drastic. And there is a lot of regional export disparity. Some regions, particularly, let us say West India, Southern India is doing relatively much better compared to, let us say, Northern India, compared to, let us say, the Eastern India. Let us say, Odisha is also a coastal state. West Bengal is also a coastal state, but they are nowhere in competition to the other states. So this is what we need to identify, and this is where this report is going to highlight the problems, and these are the things that we need to work out in the future. Okay, so how much export contribute to the GDP and all such things, they are very important. Then now let us see the rankings category wise as well as the score. So if you see here, you will find that Uttarakhand is the top state in Himalayan states, very closely followed by Himachal Pradesh. These two are roughly equal, performance roughly the same. But if you see the third state after that, the gap is huge. The score of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh is just around 40-41, but Tripura score is around 27. Sikkim is also very similar to Tripura. Its score is also around 27 or 28. And next is further more disappointing, and that is Manipur. That is 15.78. And after that, score goes down further. So you see, it's not just about the ranks, it's also about how much gap is there between different states. So infrastructure in our general readiness in Arunachal Pradesh is only 1/4 compared to, let us say, Himachal Pradesh. And this is something where we have to catch up, or where these areas have to catch up with the help of center, with the help of investments obviously. Here, now you compare the score. Gujarat is the top state in the coastal areas, but look at the difference between Uttarakhand and Gujarat. Although Uttarakhand itself is the top state in its category, but the difference between Gujarat and Uttarakhand is almost the double. The score of Gujarat is double. That means the level of infrastructure, the policy support, all of that in Gujarat is double compared to Uttarakhand. So again, you can find that there is a lot of difference in the coastal states versus the Himalayan states. The worst performing coastal state, that is West Bengal, is very close to the best performing Himalayan state. Okay. And 3 states in particular, Odisha, Kerala and West Bengal, they are performing very poorly. Kerala is poor because its export diversification is poor. Some of the other parameters is poor. Okay. Then we come to the UT and city states. In the UT and city states category, it is Delhi followed by Gujarat. And after that we see Jammu and Kashmir, and there is a huge gap between Jammu and Kashmir and Goa. And surprisingly, Puducherry or Pondicherry is at 5th rank. Despite being a coastal state, despite being very close to the Chennai port, despite being an area which can actually be very well performing compared to the other areas. At least Pondicherry should be performing at par with Goa. There is no reason why it should not be performing at the level of Goa. So this is where we can identify a very easy gap. Then Dadar, Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, these areas also must perform better. Okay? They have excellent infrastructure support. They are the states which have coastal areas, and they should do better. Anyways, the point I am trying to identify here, that different regions have such a great disparity that it doesn't even look like that they belong to the same country. In the landlocked states, it is Haryana, closely followed by Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, which are the top 3 states. And you can see interestingly that Haryana, despite being landlocked, is scoring better than Andhra Pradesh, which is a decent performing coastal state with a very big port and a long coastline. So from landlocked states, we really cannot expect the scores which are close to the coastal states. Definitely there is room for improvement, but the coastal states, the score should not be this much low. This also the comparison tells us. At least all the coastal states must be performing above 60. All the landlocked states must be performing above 40, 45. At least the bottom performer should be above 45. The best performer should be compared to the lower in the coastal. So the top in the landlocked should be scoring around 60 in the score. So this is the broader idea. That is how you identify the weak areas. That is how you identify the good areas. And that is how you work and create your further policies. And these are the overall rankings, as we can see. So obviously the top 4 are the coastal states, followed by Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab, and then Andhra and Telangana. So this is no surprise. We have already analyzed different regions here. Okay, so ranks are not only on the category of the states. Ranks are also provided on different pillars. That in what particular category, which state is performing well, which is not performing well. So for example, when it comes to the policy support, Madhya Pradesh is really doing very well. In fact, the score here is also excellent. That is around 95. That means Madhya Pradesh is providing almost close to the ideal support to exports. Now, despite being a landlocked state, a large state with lot of underdeveloped area, it is very good that it is providing policy support. So we will see Madhya Pradesh will improve very quickly in the long run. Okay, it really falls down when it comes to the export ecosystem. They do not have the ecosystem at present, but it is policy which creates ecosystem. So in the long run, these states which are performing well here will continue to do better. So Gujarat, Maharashtra have good export ecosystem. They have the good infrastructure, they have SEZs, they have the support system, they have the financing available, they have different kind of supports. Okay, and here also the difference is quite visible. After the top 2, which is around 80, the next performance is directly 55. So when you have to analyze performance of export in India, how you are going to write? We have seen the report to a large extent. What we are going to analyze, what are our takeaways from the report, how it is going to help in writing the answers. See, if you have to analyze India's exports, if you have to talk about India's export, one of the great weakness that is visible from here is great regional disparity. Indian exports are dependent upon a few states, a few regions in India. West India, that is Gujarat, Maharashtra, accounts for a bulk of India's export. And if we further include few more states, okay, so for example Tamil Nadu, we include Andhra Pradesh, we include Karnataka, we include some of the better performance in hinterland, for example Haryana, etc., then we will see they will account for bulk of the exports. And performance and contribution of some of the other states is very appalling. So this gap must cover up. We must do something in order to cover up the gap. So this is the learning from the report. This is what we learn and this is how we answer. So export ecosystem pillar, I have discussed it. The gap is alarming here. Comparatively in policy area, you will see gap is not that great. The top performer is 95, the bottom performer is also 80. The gap is not too alarming. In business ecosystem, it is Delhi which performs very well. They have infrastructure for businesses. And it is this reason why they have a better rank otherwise. But apart from this, their policy support is pathetic, their other supports are pathetic, and their overall rank is very poor compared to what is their score in the business ecosystem. This is a parameter with the highest score, 40%. So that means Delhi must be performing very, very poor in all other areas in order to score that bad. Okay, so Delhi's overall score is around 43. So Delhi's score falls to almost half after including other parameters. That means it must be scoring less than 30 on other parameters. This is what we need to see. That is how you create your policy. Now, if Delhi would be creating its policies, Delhi would be highlighting its approach to exports, then it should take into account they have good business ecosystem. This is not the area where they need to work upon. They need to work upon other areas. Their policy support is poor. Their export performance pillar, which obviously they have to improve. These are the areas, export ecosystem, these are the areas where they have to work upon. The policy support actually is very poor. So, after Delhi, it is Maharashtra, followed by Karnataka, Haryana, and then Gujarat. These are the states which have greater environment or much better environment for businesses overall, not just exports, but overall business system. And then we come to the export performance. What is your performance on the exports? So here we see Gujarat has a score of 100%. That means their performance is excellent. They have great diversification record. They have a great growth record. So this is the reason why Gujarat is performing as the top state. And as you see immediately after, the next state is Andhra Pradesh with 50% score. So the gap here is just too starking. So this is what shows us that other states have not performed compared to their potential. Gujarat is definitely scoring exactly as per their potential. They are doing their maximum possible. They are doing their best. That is only when you get 100% score. Okay, now the learnings from the reports. We have looked at the methodology, we have looked at the rankings, we have discussed broadly the major points in the reports. Now, very quickly, we will cover up what we need to learn from the report, what we have understood, how this report has improved our knowledge in the export areas. So this report, Export Preparedness Index, has identified three major challenges. There are at the state level, or in general, if we say in the export areas, if we identify India's performance, then three big challenges are there. One of them is poor R&D support, very, very poor R&D support by the states. Then very poor trade support. Okay, except a handful of states, others are not giving adequate trade support. They are not giving incentive to the businesses. They are not providing infrastructure for their support. And the one which I have already highlighted a lot, that inter and intra-regional differences. This is one of our biggest weakness. That some regions account for bulk of our exports. This obviously is the biggest weakness. So, if we go into further details, it again talks about that all the states in India spend less than 1% of their state GDP onto their R&D. So R&D support from Indian state is really very, very poor. If this can improve, this will bring a lot of changes. Then trade support itself remains overall a very low scoring sub-pillar. If we really want to look at it again, you can find. Just a minute. Okay, so let us look at the trade policy support. Yes. So in the trade policy area, if we leave the top states, then the scores in rest of the areas are really very, very poor. Export ecosystem, except the first two, the support is very, very poor. So when it comes to providing the support for export specific purposes, there we are very, very poor. Okay. Trade infrastructure for export scheme. This is where we need to improve the projects, we need to create workshops, we need to do some kind of capacity building in the future. So those are the areas to look forward to. And then growth and orientation also remains a poor area. So this is where there is a big gap between different states further. So these are the problems. The top three, as I've already discussed, the huge difference between different states and different regions in India, and then the very poor R&D expenditure and very poor policy support. The other 3 points are further explaining those points only. How do we further improve the exports at state level, and then we will look at the national level. So first of all, we need to create more export promotion hubs. We need to create more SEZ or similar structure in order to provide greater export infrastructure support and trade policy support. Okay, we need to provide some workshops, we need to provide certain trainings to the exporters, we need to provide certain trainings in order to focus on their quality support, we need to provide them with additional trainings. Then states need to identify key trade facilitation issues. What are the trade facilitation issues? How do you facilitate trade as a state? As a state, I can facilitate the trade by providing easy availability of forex, which of course is a central level job, so I will not include in the state area, but providing the financing activities, providing the trade guarantee documents, then doing the verification and giving clearances very quickly. So all those support at least state can provide. This is what we talk about when it comes to the trade facilitation. Trade facilitation, how do you support the trade activity? How do you give them support? How do you facilitate them? How can you do that? By providing financial support, by providing the permissions and approvals very quickly, doing your timely checkups. But unfortunately, that is where different states have doing very poorly. And then again, we are talking about the capacity building and orientation workshops. Now, this is not a very ignorable point. This is very important, because if you allow me just 1 minute in order to go in further detail, then I would like to go little beyond the scope of this topic as such. See, in India, when we look at the performance of the exports or look at the performance of our MSME exporters, one of the weakest point that we can identify is that our exporters in many cases are not even aware of the different agreements of India. India already has a lot of DTAA, Double Tax Avoidance Treaty. India already has a lot of FTA, CECA, CEPA. But unfortunately, when we do some research, when we collect ground data, then we find that many of our exporters are not claiming advantages under those provisions. See, if India, Singapore, they have a CECA or CEPA and they provide special concessions, it is not automatically available. It is something for which you have to apply. For example, from India, a company is exporting to another company in Singapore. Now, the average duty in general is 9%, but since India is given a special concession under CECA, the importing company in Singapore will have to apply, and after it will apply, it will get a lower duty, and then the cost of product will be cheaper to that company in Singapore. To simplify it, the companies can reduce their procurement cost in Singapore by buying from India, but for that, Indian exporters have to issue certificates, and many a times Indian exporters are not even aware of that, and certificates are not available, and because of that they are not able to get business, they are not able to improve their business. If you conduct workshops, if you train all your, let us say, business owners, particularly MSME owners, then you will find that many of them are not very well educated. They are trained in the business in a family tradition by starting doing work at an early age in the family institutions. but they are not formally trained, and when it comes to the legal aspects, their knowledge is limited. So they are unable to take advantage of DTAA, they are unable to take advantage of EPA. And in order to ensure that all our companies take advantage of these treaties, we need to train them, we need to give information to them. These workshops can do that very well. Then our workers need to know certain rules. What are the hygiene standards in other countries? What are the packaging standards in other countries? Because you need to match those hygiene and packaging standards when you are exporting to that country. Expectation in Japan would be very different from, let us say, expectation in Fiji. So when you are exporting to Japan, even if it's the same company, same product, you may have to package it differently, otherwise it would be perceived poorly in Japan. So how you are going to train all these relatively lower educated, uneducated factory workers towards that? How you are going to create awareness? It is through such workshops. So these workshops are very important. So that is why I said I will take 2-3 minutes in order to explain the topic of workshops, because otherwise it simply sounds as a buzzword that okay, workshop ho jati hongi. I mean, there would be workshops which these people will conduct. Then state must work on providing the credit support. We have already discussed that financial support is very important, and finance is one area where state also have a lot of control through the cooperative banking and through other state level bodies which they control, and hence they can improve the banking facilities, particularly the cooperative banking support. And we have found the states which have better credit support are doing better. Even if they do not have FDI, still they would be doing better compared to the other areas. And then internet infrastructure, land infrastructure, power infrastructure, all of that is very important. So industrial land, internet facilities are very important aspects of infrastructure. Cluster formation is very, very important. If you do not have clusters, if you do not have the specific areas for specific industry, then you are not likely to excel. What is a cluster? Cluster is a small geographical area in which one particular type of industry is present. Now, when we say one particular type of industry, then it would also include the different industries which would be supplying to that big industry, and certain industries which would be working in close coordination with such industries. So, for example, Gurgaon or Gurugram has emerged as a automobile hub. There are many big factories in Gurugram. Whether it comes to two-wheelers, four-wheelers, there are large number of companies which are present. Likewise, Chennai, likewise Pune, these are some of the big automobile hubs. Now, in these cities, not only big automobile makers like Suzuki, Bajaj, Honda, they are present, but thousands of small other companies which support these companies, they are also available. We call them ancillary factories or ancillary companies. They provide large number of different small components, and then those big companies can focus on their work, which is essentially the high quality assembling and providing the body and the engines. That is the core competence of these companies. Providing other small inputs, that is the ancillary industry's job. If you have good ancillary industry, the cost of producing car would be much less. Otherwise, the cost of producing car would be very high. Now, in Gurgaon or Gurugram, the auto ancillary industry itself is so big that today, if a car maker has to establish factory, they definitely will have to consider Gurugram or very close by areas, because then they will also get support from this ancillary industry very easily. Just as think about this small thing, all of the cars and motorcycles, they have locks, they have keys. In India, there are handful of companies which produce them, and producing just the locks of these cars and motorcycle itself is a billions of dollars of business. So there is a small company, Minda, which was a MSME to begin with, has become a more than $1 billion enterprise today. So that is how these component makers, ancillary maker themselves emerge into big business behemoths over time. So the cluster formation is also very important, not only from export point of view, but for overall industrial development. So these are the points you need to understand. Whenever you have to talk about the industrial growth, you have to talk about the export growth, you need to talk about the cluster formation. Then the center state coordination is a very important issue, and that is where we need to invest. So there must be certain body. So earlier I mentioned a district level officer. Maybe this officer's job would be to coordinate between state and center. There are different state level policies, center level policies. How are they coordinating? How to ensure that different companies are taking advantage of both and these are not mutually conflicting to each other. So that is something also we need to consider. Then at the state level, we have already seen the points. Now at the center level or at the national level, what are the overall observations from the report? The report also provides certain data on the export performance of India, but that data is already very old. We have much better and updated data from the economic survey. And if you want to see analysis of the India's trade, then I would urge you to look at my different video that is in the category of economic survey, and we'll also post a link in the comments for that video, and that is the video on the trade, India's international trade. And compared to report, that video provides much more recent and updated data taken from the economic survey and some of the recent documents. So I'm not going into the detail of the export performance from this report, because this report is providing us very old data which is not very relevant today, because we have much later data available because of the survey. Now at national level, what we can do? So specialization is very ironical for India, because from India, what do we expect? If we look at the resource allocation of India, resource allocation as in how much labor, capital, quality of labor is available to India and what natural resources are available to India, then according to that, India should be doing very well in the low skill category of export compared to the high skill category of exports. And when we analyze India's exports, then we find that a lot of India's exports are actually in the high value added category. They are the product of highly skilled industry or highly skilled workforce. So if you look at the India's export, the exports are in auto parts, electronics, machinery, pharmaceuticals. Now this is surprising, because logically these are high skilled areas, these are high value addition areas. These are the areas where countries with high capital support like Japan, like USA, like Germany, South Korea, these could be doing well. But India was not supposed to do well in these areas. But India is doing very well in these areas. So it's great for India. But this also means something, that India's core competence was low skill exports, which can provide mass employment. That is where we are missing. So that is something we need to identify and work upon. So low skill manufacturing is our weakness. So areas like apparels, textile, leather, footwear, this is where our performance is decent, but it is nowhere close to our potential. India should be the top exporter of these products, but unfortunately we are not. So this is one area where we need to look at specifically. And if you can look at our trade policy, or the students who regularly read and are aware, then they would know in 2017-18 financial year, we announced certain special policies. We announced a special package for the ready-made garments, and we announced a special policy for the leather apparels. So we have already provided additional policy support for these areas. So while we have identified these are the areas to work, we have already providing them with better policy support. Then once again, the report talks about one district, one product scheme. So in my classes, I have always been discussing about it, and anyways, it has been discussed by many other people in past as well, that something like one district, one product, or if not one district, one product, then a cluster of district and particular product should be highlighted. So maybe like Coimbatore, Salem, this group of district should be a focus area for export of ready-made garments, because these are doing really excellent work in that area, Tirupur, etc. So may not be one district exactly, but maybe a cluster of district, but we should have certain policy, at least for 250 to 300 products, or maybe more. For some products, definitely it can be one district, one product. Or if there is no such competitive advantage as of now, then we should go on and create some. We should have a policy towards that, that let us say, we want to create this export infrastructure in this particular city. If this city has certain natural advantage, some natural resources may be around that, and if not in that case, then we will create a special infrastructure. So that is going to be useful for India. This will create clusters, and I've already discussed the importance of clusters with you. So that is very important. Then we need to upgrade the technology. The technology level in Indian companies is not comparable to the investments that are coming into the top exporters in the world. Of course, we need not talk about the global average. We need not compare ourselves with some of the poor performing countries. We should be comparing ourselves with the top countries, because when we are going to export in the international market, this is the top countries with which we have to compete. So we need a timely technology upgradation and upskilling of the labor force, because our efficiency is poor. And lastly, the investment in R&D, a point which I have already highlighted many times today. Investment in R&D and design is very, very important, and this is one of the weak area of ours at present. So we need to work upon this area. States must provide support, and not just the states, in general the business owners must also invest more in R&D and design, and then we can focus on the shift from the raw material and intermediary goods to more complex and unique products to the long-term sustainable export growth. So this is all that we have to take from this report. I have provided a detailed analysis of the methodology, the process that goes into creating such a report, on what basis we have developed this detailed document. Okay, so the report is based upon large number of measurable parameters and we can also identify that why a particular state is at what particular rank, in which areas it is performing better, in which areas it is performing weaker, what areas it should focus upon. So all this report tells us. So the methodology, the rankings, and then the problems that we have identified with the help of this report, and ultimately the suggestions. That is all what we wanted to learn from this report, and with this the report is complete. Thank you.